Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Construct Innovate webinar series on modern methods of construction. My name is Jamie Goggins, and I'm Director of Construct Innovate, which is Ireland's National Research Centre for Construction Technology and Innovation. This week, we're going to focus on off-site manufacture to on-site construction. We've three fantastic speakers. Very, very lucky again this week to have three fantastic speakers. First speaker is Aaron Curley, who's a management consultant who has a lot of experience of working in modular construction, in particular with a large volumetric 3D modular company in the UK. So he's going to give us lessons learned from scaling modular construction in the UK, because we obviously have to speed towards scale here in Ireland if we want to help relieve the housing crisis within Ireland. Then we have Richard Butler, who's the Senior Executive Professional with the National Building Control Office and Market Surveillance. And he's going to speak about building control perspectives of off-site and on-site compliance. And then we have Terry Mundy, who's a BOPAS consultant. So BOPAS are Buildoffsite Property Assurance Scheme. And he's going to cover things like assurance to the lending community of the durability of off-site manufactured systems. So just conscious of time. So what I want to do, we're going to go through the three presentations first, and then we will deal with the Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions that you want to pose to the speakers, please do put it into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So please put your Q&A in there. Our speakers might respond to those during the presentations, but we'll cover those off at the very end of the three presentations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Aaron. So Aaron Curley, who's Managing Consultant of APC Offsite, who's going to talk to us about speeding towards scale, which is obviously what we need in Ireland. Over to you, Aaron.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. Just share my screen here. Oh, can you guys see my screen?
Perfect, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So my name is Aaron Curley. I'm currently working as a management consultant, both on a freelance basis and also with Curley Consulting. I think is involved in MMC Ireland. And my presentation today is going to be speeding towards scale. So lessons learned from scaling modular construction in the UK. I think it's probably been widely documented around some of the large failings, particularly with modular. But what wasn't been talking about as much as some of the lessons learned, so some of the positive things that have happened, and then of course some of the where the challenges arose. So quickly, I'll be kind of giving the case to the Ilka Homes. I worked at Ilka as a program manager, supporting setting up their PMO function. I think I'll get more in detail on Ilka Homes and who it was. We'll then kind of talk through some of the modular successes from Ilka, so what they actually had done well, and some of the lessons learned that might be applicable to people approaching modular in Ireland and also other MMC categories as well. This was particularly around product design, the manufacturing process, and the DFMA approach. I'll also kind of go through some of the scaling challenges in particular with Ilka Homes, but also what was felt across the modular industry in the UK, before summarising some of the lessons and considerations for the Irish MMC companies. So very quickly, many might already be aware of who Ilka Homes were. Ilka Homes were established in 2018 and were at one point the largest low-rise modular construction company in the UK. They had an ambitious vision to become one of the top 10 builders by 2030, and the business model was focused on creating a standard modular product and reducing the labour cost that was actually required to build that modular product, which we'll get into in more detail. The modules themselves were built in a factory in the North UK, just north of Leeds, in this 250,000 square foot facility, which you can see on the right. And the modules came with about a 90% PMV value, so pre-manufactured value, which meant that things like M&E fittings, kitchens, bathroom layouts were all fitted in the module before it went to site, as well as the external facades. So the two facade options were brick slip or render finished. They had a 300 million total investment. They had over 1,000 homes delivered, and they were one of the first to go through the NHBC accepts and the BOPAS 100-year durability assessment, which again that demonstrates that they were definitely pioneers and had to probably go through some of the pain points in parallel with some of the large modular companies in the UK. Before they went into administration in June of last year, they had over 1,100 employees. And I think it's probably worth noting, just to give you a sense of the ambitious scale. I joined the business in March 2021, but there was about 350 employees in the space of a year, that grew to 1,100. Whether that was the right or wrong approach, we'll come on to that as well. The ambition was to grow to 16 modules a day, so approximately it was 2 modules per house. They were achieving 8 modules per day before they went into administration. And again, we'll get into more detail about what that process looked like. So I suppose highlighting some of the successes, Ilka was regarded as having an excellent modular product. Again, in comparison to probably some of the other large UK companies that unfortunately didn't make it either. The manufacturing concept and the product, the modular product, were one of their strong points, along with the DFMA approach. And the fact that they successfully delivered over 1,000 homes, which I suppose showed that they had a model working, albeit they were unable to make it profitable before running out of money. I suppose just going through some of the approach to modular product, and again, some of the work bearing in mind for people approaching MMC, and particularly modular in Ireland. There was a significant upfront design, R&D, and close collaboration with customers, designers, and manufacturers to try and establish a standard modular product. As mentioned, the business model was focusing around replicating many of the automotive principles. So, typically in the North UK, there are many existing automotive expertise from an engineering perspective. So there was, before any factory was laid out, there was significant upfront investment deciding what was the standard product going to be, how would it work, and that collaboration operated, as mentioned, from the customer design, but also with the manufacturing team as well. So before agreeing with clients and building a pipeline of products, being very careful on how they were actually going to manufacture that to support the scale and growth plans. Some of them automotive principles, which we'll touch on shortly, which is very much around kind of creating a standard chassis design, implementing sub-assemblies, and managing product release workflows, and a focus on repeatability and familiarization as well. On the back of that, and through all of that upfront investment, they settled on kind of core 2 module types, which was a ground floor and an upper floor. They also had some room in the roof modules, which were all again built on light gauge steel frames. And through them 2 core module types, there was 9 core house types, which you can see outlined on the bottom of the screen. So again, at the halt, this was one of the standard Ilka house modules. That just gives you an overview of the typical layout. So the modules were about 4.9 meters wide by roughly 9 meters long. And again, they all had a standard chassis design to help improve the operational management of each of the modules as they went down the production line. And again, you can see it's the same size modules with a slightly different internal floor configuration for the second floor, again, to meet customer requirements. And then this was just the 3-story option, which had the room in the roof module here, which you can see on the right, which did go down the manufacturing process as well. And again, there was a key concept around creating the illusion of mass customization. So using a standard module type, how could we meet the different demands and the product typologies required for customers to help us build that pipeline? And that was one of the key strengths of Ilka as well. They had managed to build a pipeline. They had over 2,000 houses in contract before they went into administration, which, as I'm sure most are aware, having pipeline is key to support scaling modular manufacturing. But very quickly, just going through, I suppose, the manufacturing process before we discuss their approach to DFMA. You can see on the top right, this goes through the manufacturing process, which very much look to replicate car manufacturing. Now, I know many manufacturers in Ireland probably won't be looking to go to the scale straight away of what Ilka were trying to achieve, but again, it's worth kind of noting out the sub-assembly areas. So the process started on the bottom right, where there was bases and ceiling sub-assemblies. This was then fed on to 3 main production lines. Each line had 20 stations, and each station had a standard set of tasks. And for each task, there was a standard operating procedure, which gave both how the process worked from a very simple 1-page view with pictures included, but also the time it took to complete that task. This was built into a line balancer, which helped drive the output of the factory and helped understand how to scale. Again, it's worth noting over 90% of the factory labour in Ilka was unskilled, and this was one of their key business models. So breaking down, I suppose, the idea of building a house down to that granular level and task level of detail. Again, just worth noting that one of the key principles was moving from a manufacturing to an assembly process. So removing some of the manufacturing processes, as an example, working through or cutting plasterboard. So there was no manufacturing as per se on the key lines. It was more about assembly. So trying to create sub-assemblies, and again, increasing efficiency and output for each of the particular stations, which obviously led to an overall output within the factory. And again, it's worth mentioning one of the key benefits of having that level of data at a task level and timing level and material level really help to understand where to focus and where to value engineer the product. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, one of the key things people use is PMV, so pre-manufactured value, which is great. It's all about taking some of the work content in a traditional construction process back into a factory. But I think the DFMA approach is taking it the next level beyond that and looking at the labor content and the work content to complete each of them tasks, and then working with your design and manufacturing team to try and value engineer and improve how the product is put together. So very quickly, and again, there could be some lessons learned here for how people might approach once you get your product into a factory and looking at modular and probably about a panelized solution as well. What I had a very strong approach was having a manufacturing engineering team who worked on the process, not in the process. And they basically acted as the conduit between the production team and the design team to once they had the production and the data, how could they actually improve how the module was put together. This was coupled with what was called product coaches. So product coaches worked on the production line with the production team and operatives to explore opportunities for design improvements. This was then categorized and using techniques like Pareto analysis, trying to evaluate, okay, where can we prioritize trying to improve the overall design. This went through virtual and physical prototyping before going through, if it was approved, kind of a controlled change workflow to help manage and test it on the live production floor without doing it at scale. If everything was happy, they would go through what was called a pre-series production. Again, we're replicating many of the workflows taken from the automotive industry. And it was one of the key projects that happened at Ilka was what was called Project Refresh, where they managed to take all of the key learnings over the first 2 or 3 years on how to improve both the design and the process for putting the products together, which really allowed for huge efficiencies in the overall process. So just to go quickly run through some of the examples from the DFMA perspective, there was a lot of work done streamlining and value engineering the actual steel structure, which was all light gauge steel. As an example, they used the OSB racking design to remove the need for K-bracing and reduce the level of fixings. This was supported by computer modeling and reduced things like the internal walls from 1.6 to 1.2, which led to a saving of 300 kg weight, but also labor costs saving of 15 hours, which again kind of comes back to that improving how the module is assembled, as well as unlocking factory capacity given the size and constraints of the factory itself and the floor layout. Again, going through some of the other examples, they changed from an L-shaped kitchen design to a galley kitchen. This allowed us to use an external supplier to provide the modular kitchen. So again, coming back from that assembly process, moving away from the manufacturing. So rather than having somebody on the production line trying to install a kitchen, it was already pre-assembled, delivered to the line side, and then dropped into the module itself. The other point is worth mentioning is reducing the number of variants, which again reduced the complexity, both from a procurement perspective, but also how the modules were put together. So I think it was 3,500 initial kitchen variants down to 16. And again, reducing the external options. So reduced number of window variants from 135 to 12, again, improving the opportunity for creating standard sub-assemblies and speeding up that production process. Some of the other examples include sub-assemblies, so plasterboard kits, modular stairs, so redesigning the different module types to cater for, rather than having 7 different variations of the stairs, down to 1. Again, this was provided by an external supplier and delivered line side, improving overall efficiency, reducing labor content and material costs as well. Supplier innovation, so that's worth touching on. M&E wiring looms, so some of the processes taken from car manufacturing again was using a pre-wired wiring loom that was delivered to the sub-assembly areas. And this overall obviously led to improvements in labour reduction and material cost reduction. So some of the challenges that ILCA face, again, many probably have their own views on this. From being inside the camp, I think, and we're talking with some of the ILCA alumni, there was an overall consensus that there was scaled too fast, too quickly. There was an awful lot done correctly from the manufacturing process, and they really begin to develop a working manufacturing process, but did not give it enough time for the internal processes to kind of refine and mature. There was a general feeling that we never maintained cruising altitude. So once we hit 8 modules per day, there was always that constant push to go to the next level. That was probably driven by a combination of pipeline demands and also external investor requirements. Some of the other key learnings and challenges was around difficult synchronizing factory with the site teams. So trying to manage, once we get the factory up and running, trying to manage how you would install and hand over the last remaining. So it's worth noting that as well. Vertical integration is tied in with that, and having a clear IT strategy. I suppose summarising that very quickly into lessons learned for the Irish market, and work considering is open collaboration is key at all levels. ILCA were quite strong in internal collaboration and working with some of the clients, but where they maybe struggled, along with a lot of the UK, is collaborating across modular and MMC providers to try and build that pipeline and develop different innovation through the likes of different suppliers and also research bodies like Construct and Innovate. So it's definitely worth bearing in mind and pooling resource together to try and explore opportunities. Look at the process as a whole. As I mentioned, for anyone looking to scale, it's important to manage and have an understanding of how the site processes are going to be managed once you get the manufacturing process up and running. Use manufacturing data to drive the FMA, so having a view on the task times, material times, and then working from there. And consider using manufacturing teams, so dedicated resource to take a step back and look at the product and look at the process and act as the conduit between the design and production teams. And the final one there is having an important IT and digital strategy to make sure as you begin to scale that your systems and processes are efficient and can work with your company as you begin to scale. Appreciate that was quite fast moving, but thanks for your time and happy to take questions at the end, or here's my contact info as well. If anyone has any questions, just drop me a note.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Aaron. That's a fantastic quick run through in there. I suppose showing that scale. I mean, going from 350 people to 1,100 employees in the space of a year is unbelievable, and an output of 1,000 homes. So definitely a lot that can be learned from that. So please do pose your questions in there in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen there for Aaron, which would come to at the end of the presentations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Richard. Richard Butler is a senior executive professional with the National Building Control Office and Market Surveillance, and he's going to give us a perspective from the building control side of things. So over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Jamie. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So the National Building Control and Market Surveillance Office, we deal with education and training, compliance support, inspections, BCMS, and market surveillance of construction products. You know, building control legislation framework that we all work under, whether it's the Building Control Acts 1990 to 2014. So it established the building control authorities, making of building regulations, dispensations, relaxations, making of building control regulations, appeals, enforcement, powers of inspection by authorised persons, documents, events, penalties, and the professional register. When we go to the technical guidance document, there's 12 parts A to M, prepared to the second schedule of building regulations, and technical guidance documents prepared by the minister to show prima facie compliance with the building regulation. And then you have the construction product regulations as well there, and how they all interact with it. This is what is our regulatory considerations in the building construction. So we've got planning acts, your safety, your construction, and then your construction law. And then it's also important that you comply with all aspects of regulatory compliance. So Control and market surveillance are two different regulations. So put them up here for. So you have the construction materials that fall in under market surveillance. So you harmonise European standards, your DOP and CE markings, your European technical assessment documents, and when you come to your construction materials, construction work is covered under the building regulations part A to M, standard recommendations that are related to the use of certain products like blocks, concrete blocks, workmanship, materials fit for purpose, fit for use. And this is the bit that does be missing from a lot of manufacturers is, how do I get from here to here? And complying with the building regulations, the technical guidance document deals with materials and workmanship. All works to which these regulations apply shall be carried out with proper material and in a work-like manner. And it defines what proper material is for use in works in assessing the fitness for the use and the conditions of use of a material product. Consideration should be given to the durability, safety, local climate condition, i.e. that's the wind-driven rain, humidity, and other issues that could affect the building material. So workmanship is key to the material. So if the workmanship is bad, even though the material is good, it can lead to failure. So all work materials in it. So it gives ways to comply. So independent certification schemes by approved bodies, national standards, such as certification schemes like NSSI, DBA certs, unless they're assessed for Irish building regulations, don't demonstrate materials and workmanship. It's also, if you're getting argument certs on that, do detail out exposure, do an assessment on the exposure conditions, references to approved installers, and also reference to maintenance to ensure that the product is required for its lifetime. So this is where it states in the technical guidance document in point 1.0, the process of argument certs applies to those products and processes which do not fall within the scope of existing construction standards, either because they're innovative or because they deviate from established norms. The NSI argument process specifies testings where appropriate, and they issue a certificate. The certificate alone is not compliance with the building regulations. It still has to be built in accordance with the building regulations, all parts A to M. Materials, the testing is one way of showing compliance, that it's fit for its intended use, and that may be a fire test in the case of floor or wall or ceiling, or fire stopping materials. It may be performance and use. So this is the fire stopping detail between a separating wall. There is no standard test, but we know from experience, from the picture up there, that you get, it works. So the code of practice is something that all manufacturers of MMC products should be aware of. It deals with the designers and builders, which they fall in under as well, but we're just dealing on the aspect of the Building Control Authority. And the Building Control Authority should process applications for fire certs and disability access and issue decisions on the application, validate and register commencement notice of 7 days and accompanying certificates, notices of assignments and notices of undertaking, validate and register the certificate of compliance and completion, maintain a public register, and Building Control Authority should maintain a record, including a record of inspections, undertake a risk analysis of each commencement notice submitted in order to form its own inspection arrangements, and advise the design certifiers in relation to issues of compliance relating to the building or works. So the code of practice for inspecting and certifying works Inspection by local authorities are undertaken in the interest of public safety and law enforcement. This does not relieve building owners, builders, designers, or sound certifiers of their statutory obligations to build and construct in compliance with the requirements of the building regulations and to demonstrate through inspection, certification, and lodgement of documents how compliance has been achieved in practice. Reform of building control, so education and training, compliance support, inspection, market surveillance. The BCMS, which provides for the administration of building control matters, so that's the commencement notices, certificates of compliance, applications for fire safety and disability access certificates, dispensations and relaxations from building regulations, and building control register of projects, and it provides a useful source of data for government and industry as well. So what are the building control regulations? Building control regulations apply to new buildings, extensions, material alterations, and changes of use of buildings. They promote observation of the building regulations by supplementary powers of inspection and enforcement given to building control authorities. The building control regulates the commencement notice and 7-day notice, the fire safety certs, dispensation and regularization certs, maintained of a register, fees and statutory registration of building control activities. You know, question there is, what do I require as commencement notice? So the main question that you'd ask yourself, is planning permission required for the works? Is a fire cert required for the works? And does the works involve the second schedule, parts A to M of the building regulations? Article 7 deals with the requirements, direction of a building, the material alteration or extension of an existing building, a material change of use of an existing building, the building regulations apply, and whether they're exempt from fire certs. So types of commencement notices. So the commencement notice with compliance documentation under SI 9, the compliance commencement notice with opt-out declaration, SI 365 of 2015 amended, and the 7-day notice, and the old short form commencement notice without compliance documentation. So there is an obligation for everyone to give notice to the local authority of when they're going to commence works, whether it's on a commencement notice or a 7-day notice. And as part of that, they must fill out a form, a commencement notice form, and they must submit plans, calculations, specifications, and particulars as are necessary to outline how the proposed works or building will comply with the requirements of the second schedule of the building regulations, parts A to M, relevant to the works or building concerned, and include general arrangement drawings and including plan section elevations. And general arrangement drawings should be details, the construction details and the specifications in order to build that property. The 7-day notice also requires the same, and it's the basic requirements there for plans properly dimensioned, all floors, elevations, sections, and associated details. Building control should be marked for building control, not construction drawings, not marked for planning purposes only. They are for building control purposes. Where works is not properly clearly distinguished between new and old, where you're carrying out an extension or material alteration, and details of the designer responsible for preparing the drawings should be also there. The schedule of drawings to accompany the notice, and detailing out what's designed and what's yet to be designed. So if you're submitting a commencement notice, you'd expect your foundations designed to be part of your commencement notice because you're going to commence in 28 days. Or if you submit a 7-day notice, you're starting after 7 days. For compliance with the regulations, so design has the meaning assigned to it in the Building Control Act 1990 and includes the preparation of plans, particulars, drawings, specifications, calculations, and other expressions of purpose according to the construction, extension, alteration, repair, or renewal concerned is to be executed and designed will be construed accordingly. And there is information when you go into the BCMS of details of what you need to submit. And that's a minimum. It's to get a notice. So more complicated buildings, you would need more drawings. And this is what's required for each type of notice. You know, whether it's a design certifier, an assigned certifier, a nominated builder undertaking, preliminary inspection plan, general arrangement drawings are all listed out there for you. So submitting a certificate of compliance and completion, and that's required for commencement notice with additional documentation or 7-day notice. And they must demonstrate that they've complied with the parts A to M and upload a schedule of documents. Once they submit to the Building Control Authority, you know, they have 28 days or 21 days to validate it, or they can seek revised information, or they can invalidate it for reasons outlined in 3 or 4 of the schedule. But validation is solely based on the assumption that the fact stated form of notice, application, certificate, or declaration, and the attachment statutory supporting compliance documentation forming part of a notice, application, declaration are true and accurate in compliance with the requirements of the legislation. If at any time after validation it is found that there are inaccuracies, it may cause the notice, application, certificate to be subsequently invalidated. Under Section 16 of the Act, any person who contravenes by act or omission any requirement of this Act or any order, regulation, or notice under this Act shall be guilty of an offence and may be prosecuted. And the penalties are under Section 17 of the Act. So prosecution carries a cost. Building control authorities are not planning, roads, water, or waste authorities. So a valid commencement notice in itself does not mean that you have legal entitlement to commence a work or a building, and any issues outside the remit of the Building Control Authority will be brought to the attention or complaint to the relevant authority. So the onus is on the owners, builders, and designers, and assigned certifiers. Remember what you're signing on the things of the certificate of compliance and completion. Part A is signed by the builder, and he's basically stating that he carried out the works as per the design. And the assigned certifier is stating that in accordance with others on design that he and carrying out his inspections, he is certifying that the works is in compliance. And the inspection plan, as implemented and completed by the assigned certifier, should be uploaded as well. A warning: it's an offence of person to knowingly or recklessly make a statutory declaration that is false or misleading in material respect. So the Building Control Act 1990, where a certificate of compliance or notice to which Section 2K relates is subject to a Building Control Authority, the Building Control Authority shall be under a duty to any person to ensure that the building or works to which the certificate or notice relates, either during the course of the works or when completed, comply with the requirements of the building regulations, or to be free from any defects, to ensure that the certificate complies with the requirements of the Act or of the regulations or orders made under the Act, or to verify that the facts stated in the certificate are true and accurate. So the building control authorities have a big exemption. And the responsibility for complying with the legislation and the building control and the building regulations rests with owners, builders, and designers who are responsible for compliance. So thanks, and I'll take questions after.
Very good, Richard. Yep. Thank you very much. That's a great overview of building control and the regulations and that. So yeah, there's plenty of questions coming in there in the Q&A. Just keep them coming in there. We'll deal with them all afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Terry. So Terry Mundy is a consultant with BOPAS, which is Buildoffsite Property Assurance Scheme. And he's going to talk about assurance to the lending community of the durability offsite construction systems. So over to you, Terry.
Thanks very much. Yes, my name's Terry Mundy. I'm a consultant with LRQA, a global business assurance organization, and I was involved in the development of BOPAS in the first instance. Next, please. The founding partners of BOPAS, I'll just give you a brief overview of how it was set up, BOPAS. The four partners involved were BLP TIS, the technical arm of BLP, the warranty provider, LRQA, as I said, a global business assurance organization, RICS, which of course you all know, and Buildoffsite, which was set up by the UK government to promote offsite technologies. We were made aware of the fact that lenders would not lend against offsite construction, now MMC. This was post the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, because they wouldn't lend against anything that didn't have a track record. And offsite construction systems at that time had a limited track record. So in order that they could go to the market, MMC, offsite, they needed access to mortgages and lending. And we developed an assurance concept that we then put to the Council of Mortgage Lenders. Next slide, please. Who then established a steering group, an assurance steering group, which complies nationwide, Royal Bank of Scotland, Lloyds Banking Group, Santander, and the Building Societies Association, besides the four partners. Next, please. That steering group looked at all the key challenges relating to offsite, risk of systemic failure, because if repeatability is a key feature, of course, of MMC, and if you've got an embedded defect, then that's going to become a systemic issue. Durability uncertainty, which was one of the key features. Water ingress, inevitably a problem with offsite. Interface issues between design, manufacture, and construction, and uncertainty of construction system for valuation purposes. So we spent about a year dealing with these issues in terms of introducing controls which would provide assurance to the lenders as to the integrity of assured accredited systems. And we carried out 3 pilots, and the ultimate outcome was an endorsement by the lenders in respect of BOPAS, the Buildoffsite Property Assurance Scheme, and it comprised a process accreditation, a 60-year durability assessment of the construction system, which has now been extended to 100 years, as you heard in the ILCA presentation, and a web-based search facility. A certificate is also issued to the accredited organizations, and they are accredited for design, manufacture, construction, or project management of any one of those 3 in the event that the entity that's accredited isn't actually performing the work themselves, but are subcontracting it. Next slide, please. The purpose of the website was to demonstrate the status of an accredited manufacturer to stakeholders or lenders, and they could demonstrate that the construction system was BOPAS accredited, the constructor was BOPAS accredited, the manufacturer was BOPAS accredited, and the site was BOPAS approved. Next slide, please. On the BOPAS website, we have the BOPAS guidance document, which defines the processes and assessment criteria that we apply to organizations seeking accreditation. It's regularly updated to take account of trends and issues that may arise in the MMC sector in order that we can establish controls and then update our check sheets in order to ensure that we mitigate those risks. Next slide, please. So speaking of risks, one of the key features of the scheme is it's risk-based, and BOPAS requires comprehensive design failure mode effect analysis and process failure mode effect analysis to be completed. And the resultant control plans defines risk mitigation. The process is tested, review and capture lessons learned, and lessons learned to inform risk and update DFMA, PFMA, and control plan going forward. And so therefore we have a bit of a virtuous circle there. That's very high level. And just on the next slide, we look at a specific issue here. This is DFMA looking at PFMA looking at the potential for water ingress. And we're looking at every stage through manufacture, storage, transport, assembly on site to understand where water ingress could take place and how that risk can be mitigated, what controls need to be put in place. So it's very much a systematic approach to establishing what the output, which is a moisture control plan, which every organization is required to have. Next slide, please. So whilst BOPAS encompasses design, manufacture, and construction, I'm just really focusing now on the manufacture interface to construction and assembly on site, in line with the original intent of this presentation. Continuity of accountability and responsibility through the interface between manufacture and construction is, of course, a critical element. If it's the same organization that is undertaking both the manufacture and the construction, then what we require is an assigned project manager who has end-to-end responsibility. If it's a different entity, then that's undertaking the construction assembly on site from the manufacturer, then the accredited manufacturer must be accredited for project management of construction. So that means that they must have all the processes in place to oversee construction, and the person who's nominated to undertake that work must have an informed overview of construction and all the risks associated with it, as well as, of course, an understanding of the manufacturing processes involved, and can therefore understand where potential weaknesses may be in relation to the assembly and how to address those. Unit sign-off at dispatch to site, an inspection and final sign-off process on site established for units which leave the factory with outstanding work deficiencies. Often we ask manufacturers what processes they have in place for dealing with units which leave the factory with still outstanding defects, and they always very confidently say it will never happen. In reality, it happens all the time. But the important thing is to ensure that the processes are in place for highlighting and signing off all those deficiencies at site, all those outstanding deficiencies. Next slide, please. Groundworks tolerances in terms of setting out can often be a problem, and what we require is foundation layout and excavation specifications handed over from the accredited manufacturer and signed off by the groundworks organization undertaking the work. That specification should be cross-referenced in the contract between the two parties, and an audit regime should be established with verification and sign-off of critical dimensions defined in the setting out plan by the accredited manufacturer. Next slide, please. Transport risks. We require prototype testing to determine proof of concept of securing systems. The volumetric units will be exposed to both lateral and longitudinal G-forces through going around corners and acceleration and deceleration forces. And we want to be assured that the securing systems are adequate to withstand those G-forces without causing damage to the units. And so prototype testing is required in terms of undertaking journeys on the prototypes to ensure that that is the case. Also, lifting procedures should be signed off and approved. Route plan and risk assessments should be provided by the transport company and signed off and approved by the accredited manufacturer. Site access plan and storage arrangements, photographic evidence of condition on departure and on arrival to ensure who may be liable as a result of any damage that may have occurred on the way. Craneage site risk assessments and method statements must be approved. Next slide. In terms of site organizational structure, on-site organization charts, including subcontractors with defined responsibilities, should be established. Competency matrix established for all staff on site, identifying their roles and the minimum qualifications required for each role and the actual qualifications held by those individuals. Any mismatch should drop out in the form of a training or mentoring process or supervisory process. Site supervisors should be qualified to SMSTS with 5 years experience. Change management process should be defined, including changes within the authority of the site supervisor and those which have got to be then referred back to the design manager. Method statements and risk assessments for all activities should be current, specific to the relevant function, and define residual risks should be cross-referenced to the site risk register. Next slide, please. On-site processes, the assembly drawings available on site should conform to those approved by BLP, the partner within the BOPAS process. Verification of compliance with approved assembly drawings should be established. Follow-on trades do's and don'ts list available where basic structure only assembled by accredited MMC provider. This is a situation where the normally 2D arrangements are installed on site by the accredited manufacturer, and then all other activities are performed with oversight by the principal contractor on site. So a do's and don'ts list for all the follow-on trades is required to ensure that the integrity of the basic structure is not compromised by any work that may be undertaken. Responsibility for that verification of compliance with the do's and don'ts lists must be defined and should either be the accredited manufacturer or the principal contractor on site. Each unit should be inspected and signed off by experienced and competent inspectors. Next slide, please. Fire protection, compartmentation, openings are protected by fire stopping. Fire stopping processes qualified and performed by qualified operatives. All fire stopping documented and subject to 100% photographic records. And verification of installation of cavity barriers in accordance with the design should be undertaken. Next slide, please. Handover to homeowner. This is a key feature really for BOPAS, insofar as many homeowners are left in a state of sort of limbo, in no man's land almost, when they're moving into a new house. We require that the handover pack should be in hard copy plus a DVD or access to a portal with all the requisite information available online. The pack should comprise, besides all the usual features, sign-off, inspector sign-off as having met all the basic requirements, construction system details, do's and don'ts in terms of what can be hung on walls and things of that nature, schematics of the various utilities, and examples of reportable defects. This is quite critical because most defects are very much left to the homeowner to deal with, and they're called snags, which very much states in many cases what the findings may be. So we class them as quality deficiencies, and anything found post handover is classed as a quality deficiency, not a snag. Effective communication between homeowners and MMC providers should be established, and we also investigate and check up on the KPIs related to the reportable defects and the speed with which they're closed out, in order to seek to ensure that they're dealt with in a speedy fashion. Next slide, please. So in effect then, the BOPAS assurance process, it actually comprises and spans design, manufacture, construction, and homeowner occupier. And as I said, we've really only looked in a very quick way at the construction element, but it does represent the golden thread of assurance. Next slide, please. And thank you for your attention.